So today we're going to dive into a really powerful idea from an essay by Professor RJ Starr. It gets at a feeling that I think a lot of us have had, that sense that our online world, which used to feel so alive and so connected, has somehow cooled down.
And that really is the big question, isn't it? Why did the internet stop feeling like a room full of friends? I mean, remember that time when it felt like a comfortable living room, a place where you could just talk, and you felt like you were among people who got you? Starr's essay is all about asking, where did that feeling go? Professor Starr unpacks this cooling using his big idea, a framework he calls psychological architecture. Now, the core of this is that our online behavior isn't just a bunch of random habits. No. It's a structured, intelligent response to the social environment we're in. So to really get why things changed, we first have to go back and remember what that original room felt like. In the early days, sharing was just easy. It wasn't a performance. It wasn't about strategy. You'd post a kind of blurry photo of your cat or what you were having for lunch, not for engagement, but just because it was a small moment in your life and you were sharing it with a group of people you actually trusted. Psychologically, Starr has a name for these, low-intensity affiliation signals. I love that. Think of them like the digital version of a friendly nod to someone you know. They weren't about sending important information. They were the glue, the connective tissue of the community. Just a simple way of saying, hey, I'm here, I'm still part of this. But that feeling didn't last. And the shift, the way it all changed, didn't happen because of some big, dramatic fight. It was way more subtle than that. It was a gradual, quiet change, kind of like the temperature in the room slowly dropping, degree by degree, and everyone just noticed. And the way this change happened wasn't through direct bullying, not for most people anyway. Instead, Starr calls it ambient conditioning. This was the constant, low-level buzz of clever jokes, of sarcasm, of a cultural vibe that slowly taught us all a new rule. Sharing ordinary, simple things is kind of naive, maybe even a little bit embarrassing. And this is such a critical point. The silence that started to creep in, it wasn't because people stopped caring about each other. It was a learned behavior. People saw the digital eye rolling, they heard the snarky jokes, and they just learned to pause, to hold back. And this kicks off a whole internal cycle, a kind of psychological withdrawal. First, you notice what kind of posts are getting made fun of. Then, you start policing yourself, filtering every impulse through this new question. Is this actually interesting enough to post, or will people think it's dumb? And just like that, spontaneity is gone. Performance takes its place. And eventually, you just stop sharing those little connective moments at all. Now, at the exact same time all this is happening, there's another huge force at play: context collapse. All of a sudden, your audience isn't just your close friends anymore. It's your boss, your grandma, your ex, that one guy from high school you kind of can't stand. The room filled up with everyone you've ever known, and it became totally impossible to know who you were really talking to. And the result of that was massive. Because when you don't know who's listening or how they might misunderstand you, sincerity becomes a huge risk. How can you be truly open and vulnerable when your words could be twisted by literally anyone? So what do you do when being sincere feels dangerous? Well, you adapt. You put on some armor. And online, that armor is irony. It's the perfect defense, right? It's audience-proof. It lets you participate without ever really showing your cards. And if anyone calls you out, you can always say, relax, I was obviously joking. Plausible deniability. This emotional cooldown was happening right alongside another major change that Professor RJ Starr points out, one that really gets at the core of our online identity. Basically, we stopped just being people online and started becoming personal brands. And the difference is huge. We went from having an expressed self, where you're just sharing moments from your actual life as you live it, to having a managed self, where every single post is a carefully curated piece of a larger project, designed to be interesting, to add value, to be strategic. And this might just be the single sharpest observation in Professor Starr's entire essay. That photo of your lunch, it didn't go away because it was boring. It went away because it was off-brand. In this new, professionalized world, that simple, human moment was now a strategic mistake, not a point of connection. Which brings us to this weird paradox that we're all living in now. We were all trained to kind of roll our eyes at simple, everyday posts. But at the same time, we scroll through our feeds feeling disconnected and a little lonely, wondering where all the real community went. So why is that?
Because deep down, we've created a culture that wants the impossible. We crave the warmth and connection of a real community, but we have been systematically taught to avoid the one thing you absolutely need to build it: vulnerability.
But that basic human need for real connection, it didn't just disappear. Of course not. It just migrated. It fled the cold public town squares of social media and took shelter in smaller, safer places. Group chats, private message threads, close friends lists, Discord servers. Places where the audience is small, known, and trust can actually be built again. And this final quote from Starr, man, it just captures the whole tragedy so perfectly. The room didn't empty because nobody wanted to be there. It emptied because nobody wanted to be the first one to be vulnerable. It was like a social standoff where everyone was waiting for someone else to take the risk, and in the end, nobody did.
And to bring this all back home, Professor RJ Starr's framework of psychological architecture makes one thing incredibly clear. This isn't your fault. It's not my fault. It's not some kind of individual moral failure. It is a logical, collective, and very human adaptation to a social environment that quietly became hostile to sincerity.
And so let's end by turning that question back on ourselves. In a world where all the public spaces online just keep getting colder, it's a really important thing to ask. Where do you go to find the warmth? Where are your safe places? It's a crucial question if we're going to navigate the world we've built.